Hi everyone. Today I'm going to finish up my year-long series on the films of 1972. 50 films in 50 years was my goal. I hit that goal, exceeded it a little bit, much to my amazement, but it's been a very rewarding, satisfying experience for me, as I was 23 years old in 1972. And I was able to bring back some of those memories of going to see these films, what I thought about them then, what I think about them now. And then I'm going to go through one more movie, and that's a biggie, and then I'm going to give you my 10 favorite films from 1972. But first of all, I have to get to that one movie, because anybody who's been following this series know that I've neglected to mention the biggie of the year, which is The Godfather. And I had kind of neglected to do this for various reasons, but there's no denying the importance of The Godfather historically, because on the recent Sight and Sound BFI poll, the critics poll, it came in number 12. The directors poll came in number 3. The critics had 13 movies from the 1970s. The Godfather is the only one from 72. Now the directors had 23 movies from 1970s. Almost a quarter of the movies on that list were from the 1970s. Again, The Godfather is the only movie that came out in 1972. So I'm reluctant to talk about the movie because it's a great classic. What can I add to the conversation? Not much, if any. And there's so much been written about The Godfather. And I'd like to talk about unsung movies, and obviously The Godfather is one of the most sung films of all time. But I have to, and I also have to confess that the movie back then and when I watched it the other night, I simply don't feel the same impact that most movie lovers have to the film. One of the reasons might be because, as far as crime movies go, I much prefer the outlaw, the kind of crime movie, rather than the organized crime version. Organized crime has always struck me as a very unsavory element in society. I've read quite a few books on organized crime, nonfiction, and I'm not sure they're worthy of the kind of romanticism that Miro Puzo and Coppola give them. They're in real life, you probably would not want to know any of these people. There's that, and there's the sense of evil that's kind of institutionalized evil rather than individual evil. Like, all the evil is justified by protecting the family, the institution of this organization. It also has it has a lot of killings in it. I think there's maybe too many killings, at least in the movie part, which obviously has to abridge some of the other exposition that's in the novel, and it's very gruesome. I remember leaving the theater. I saw it on the opening week, and there was a big crowd. I saw it with my cousin who loved the movie. I had mixed feelings, but to see so many killings done and so gruesomely, especially at the end, that was tough to take for an audience, whether you liked the movie or not. And I read a biography of Coppola where he states that he feels some regret that he spent so many years of his life on these Godfather movies, where he says is basically just men killing other men, and not working on more personal films. And that's the other thing about it. In Coppola's career, The Godfather really isn't a personal film, and he was working on a personal film, The Conversation. He was ready to go. He's reluctant to do The Godfather, but his Zoetrope Studios, he needed money, which is not to say that he didn't put his all. He certainly did. He was on the verge of a nervous breakdown throughout the filming of The Godfather, but it was, The Conversation is and I tend towards the personal films of great film directors, and to me, and I think to Coppola, I think that's either his favorite film that he ever directed, or definitely one of them. But there's no denying the craftsmanship the casting, the way Coppola structured the screenplay, the performances, the great cinematography by Gordon Willis, the music by Nino Rota. Certainly on a craftsmanship level, this is a very, very impressive work. Now, I also did my due diligence. I read a background book on The Godfather. Leave the gun, take the cannoli. One of the great lines, Richard Castellano gets in the movie. This is by Mark Seals from 2021. It's a hefty book. It's got lots of great stories in it. It covers all the production woes, the battle that Coppola had for the casting. He ended up getting the exact cast that he wanted, but you would not believe some of the alternatives that were brought in to play, especially with Al Pacino. Al Pacino was not, the studio heads did not like it. Pacino did not think he was suited for the film. He was too short. Diane Keaton was too tall. They didn't make a good match. And then even in the beginning parts of the film, Pacino was unsteady, and he thought he was going to be fired for sure. Coppola often thought that he was going to be fired. It was an embattled production, to be sure, and they had Coppola insisted on filming in New York City. They had to make Albert Ruddy, the producer, had to make his peace with the mafia. Ironically enough, the mafia, by all accounts, this is by far the most popular film, the favorite film of the mafia today. And then also the post-production. This is where Robert Evans, who was involved, 24/7, overseeing this project from afar, but especially the post-production, and he fought, with Coppola and Reddy, and there was so much disagreement, but in the end, he came around to almost everything that Coppola wanted, and including the 3-hour runtime, which was highly controversial for a 1972 movie. Seal also talks very much about Mario Puzo, and because Puzo, well, let me tell you a little bit about Puzo, because Seal covers a lot in the opening parts of his book, because this is the development of The Godfather. Puzo had written, I think, 2 kind of literary novels, got good reviews, no sales. He tried to support himself by being a pulp fiction writer for magazines, but he had a family. He was always in financial straits. He was very close with his brother, who was financially successful, so he supported him. And then one day he heard he was at a party, I think, and a friend of his mentioned to him, there's never been a really good novel about the mafia. Now, Puzo, like Coppola, knew nothing about the mafia. I mean, he knew they were there. They both grew up in Italian-American neighborhoods, so they knew they were around, but they really had never had any dealings with them. They didn't really know how they were operating. So he did voluminous research. Puzo did, and much of that research is, some of the storylines in the Godfather come from that research. And when I read the Godfather was a gigantic bestseller, so he went from poverty to riches almost overnight, and then selling the movie to a movie studio, or selling the book to a movie studio. He was also hired to do the screenplay. But this is before Coppola came aboard, and he had no idea how to write a screenplay. But so I did read for the first time ever. I read The Godfather, and a couple of months ago, when it was nice. It was like early fall, and I live right outside a small park that I'm usually the only one out there. And so I read it in like 3-4 days. I really enjoyed this book. I'm sure if you're a fan of the movie, you've probably read it. I was surprised as far, it's not a great work of art, but as far as bestsellerdom goes, it's pretty good. And what really surprised me about the novel is that everything in the movie, all the great set pieces that people love, it's almost exactly the way it is in the book. Even some of the dialogue that's in the movie is in the book. And Now, Coppola did excise a big chunk of the book and a subplot involving the woman that Sonny has sex with, the bridesmaid that Sonny has sex with at his sister's wedding. And she moves to Las Vegas. There's a lot more in Las Vegas. She gets involved with a doctor who also ministers to Johnny Fontaine and then to some of the Corleones. So there's a deep connection between them, and a whole lot more about Johnny Fontaine. And this is all kind of like the sexual element. There's a lot of sex in the novel, not in the movie. And as well as Sonny's, how well endowed Sonny is. There's a lot of stuff about that. And Coppola, I think, very properly got rid of all this stuff because, he doesn't do sex anyways. Is there any eroticism or sexuality in a Coppola movie? I don't know. There might be, but I doubt it. And that surprised me. And the abruptness of Michael Corleone's transformation from college boy, war hero, gonna become a senator, governor, president, who knows? His transformation, which comes almost exactly halfway in the movie, is really the crux of the movie in the sense that now he is realizing his true male nature. So this is very much a part of the films in 1972, at the time of the wave of that era of feminism, and that we would have Hollywood films were almost all about male identity and how masculine, who am I, what makes me a man. There's quite a few films like that in 1972, and especially Michael's transformation is certainly part of that. Deliverance would be another one that very much a group of men, testing their masculinity as they go off into a rural jungle of where they have to face all their fears. But that's enough of The Godfather. Let's get to my 10 favorite films. I'm going to go through them very quick. I have videos for all these movies that I'm going to, these 10 films, and I'll link to the playlist where you can find all these films and 40 some more. So, and these are films, this is an eccentric list. This is films that I just had a lot of fun with or did indeed have an impact on me. Number 10 is And Hope to Die. And this is a crazy Euro crime movie set in Canada, in Montreal, and starring Robert Ryan, Jean-Louis Trintignant, and Aldo Ray. I love the scenes between Ryan and Trintignant. I think it's almost like mythical. two men from totally different eras in film. This is a heist movie. Trintignant is a man on the run. He hides out in this farmhouse that these other men are engaged in planning a elaborate heist, and they don't know what to do with him. He has to use all his wits to try to ingratiate himself into the group. And then when we get to the heist that they planned, I mean, it's so wild and so wacky. Number 9 is another just absolutely fun movie, Horror Express, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee. This is The Thing on a Train. and Lee and Cushing play rival scientists, but in order to protect their lives and the lives of the other people on the train, they have to figure out how to disable this creature, this thing-like creature that is deadly. So it's almost all on the train. I love movies on a train. It's got a great, funny, hilarious, crazy cameo from Telly Savalas in the final act. It was part of the horror movies that I talked about in October, this is another one, as well as And Hope to Die, I had never seen before. Number 8 will be The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, a John Huston film with a very entertaining, quite unusual performance from Paul Newman. It was from a screenplay by John Milius, who intended to be like a tribute to Sergio Leone. John Huston Was not a mythic. He didn't care about, he was a very cynical man. He didn't care about the mythic quality of Westerns. He gets down to the nitty gritty, a satire of, this is basically a satire of Westerns. There's a great cast, Anthony Perkins and Stacy Keach and Big Ben. Big Ben basically steals the bear, basically steals the show. Ava Gardner comes by at the end as Lily Langtry. Number 7 is a film I don't have, but it's The Heartbreak Kid, directed by Elaine May. The DVD is long out of print, it's never been on Blu-ray. It doesn't stream anywhere. There is a copy that pops up now and then on YouTube. It's somewhat watchable. And in fact, I did watch it, as Elaine May was only the one of 2 directors, Chantal Akerman, the other one, who released the film in 1972, as far as I could tell. There may have been more. And it's a very funny film, very much in tune with Elaine May's rather ironic character study rather than a jokey movie. Jeannie Berlin, who is Elaine May's real-life daughter, plays the newlywed of a man played by Charles Grodin. They go on honeymoon. He discovers early on that I made a mistake. And then on the beach, he discovers out of the sun comes Sybil Shepherd, ethereally beautiful in 1972. And then he decides, this marriage is over. I'm going to pursue this fantastic beauty all the way up to the snowy winter of Minnesota. It's very similar in some ways to The Graduate, directed by Elaine May's former comedy partner, Mike Nichols. But it has her very distinctive comic style. And then number 6 is The King of Marvin Gardens, starring Bruce Dern and Jack Nicholson, Ellen Burstyn, directed by Bob Rafelson, set in Atlantic City in 1972, a rather decrepit, decaying city that a few years later, the first casinos outside of Las Vegas would open in Atlantic City, and the city would then be revitalized. But this is not, this is like in wintertime, off season, in ancient looking hotels, 2 brothers who, one of them is a big time schemer trying to bring his other brother into his get rich quick schemes. And just Nicholson at one of his more unusual, subdued performances, very good. Bruce Dern playing the kind of volatile brother part, very well suited to him. And then number 5 is Last Tango in Paris by Bernardo Bertolucci. Now in '72, this film was highly praised, and it might have been thought that outside of The Godfather, this would be a film that would stand the test of time. It was controversial in its day, became even more controversial in the early 2000s when one of its stars, Maria Schneider, came out with revelations of how she thought she was mistreated during the filming of the movie. But up until that point, she had always highly praised the movie. And this was a surprise for me because I didn't really care for this movie, '72. I really liked it this time, mostly because of Maria Schneider herself. I think she is absolutely fabulous in this movie. She was overshadowed in the reviews because '72 was the year that of The Godfather, and Marlon Brando was kind of worshipped. He was sort of like he was more than an actor. He was sort of like this godlike figure as the greatest actor of all time. But he plays a real shit in The Last Tango, and again we have where the focus is going to be on the male and the male self-pity, the traumas that he has felt, and how that affects his relationship with this Maria Schneider character. Bertolucci is always visually interesting. This is a film that of all the films in 1972 that I revisited, that was the biggest surprise for me. Number 4 is Images. This is Robert Altman's kind of psychological horror about a woman's mental deterioration. Very fractured storytelling, fantastic performance by Susanna York, who won the Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival for that year. It's filmed in, I think they filmed in Ireland. Beautiful setting. It's both terrifying and terrifying and really quite. We're very disturbed by what's going on. We can't really figure out exactly what's going on. I like those kind of movies. Number 3 is Ulzana's Raid. This is from Robert Aldrich, starring Burt Lancaster. One of Robert Aldrich's most brutal films, a career of making brutal films. But it's very much in the times that we have some sympathy for the Indians, even though Ulzana is a warrior who goes out and leaves the reservation. He's sick of being demasculized by the army, and the men around him are all becoming drunks. He goes out for one last warpath, and he's violently, he's pretty violent on the warpath. So he has to be caught. Burt Lancaster is a scout. He has sympathy for the way the Indians are being treated, but he knows he has to go out and kill Ulzana, even though he does in fact have some level of sympathy for him and for the lifestyle that the Indians had to give up in order to join the civilization of the United States. Number 2 is The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeois by Louis Buñuel. It is the culmination, part of the culmination. His whole late career is just fantastic, and I think he still has maybe 2 or 3 films left to direct. This is a funny movie. It's much fun. And the more times you watch this movie, the funnier it gets. And you discover different things in it. It's almost indescribable. Buñuel was at the forefront of surrealism in the 1920s and 30s. And he just has so much fun with this story. And we have dreams within dreams. It's just, this was, outside of The Godfather, this was probably the most awarded film. I think it won the Best Foreign Film in the Oscar that year, and I think it won Best Film in the National Society of Film Critics as well, over The Godfather. And then my number 1 movie is probably, no one's going to choose this as their number 1 movie in 1972, but I am, because I'm a little weird. But not that this isn't a great movie, I think it is. It's The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, directed by Rainier Werner Fassbinder. It may be my favorite Fassbinder. It's all set in one room. It's about a love affair between 2 women. One is famous. She's a famous designer, played by Margaret Carlson. She takes under her wing and falls in love with a younger woman played by Hanna Schygulla. She owns all the power in the beginning of the film, but then gradually it's Hanna Schygulla that has the power over Petra von Kant, which is a common theme in Fassbinder movies, the power struggles in human relationships. But it's all set in one room. It was based on a play, an unsuccessful play that Fassbinder had written a few years before, that Margaret Carlson also appeared in as Petra von Kant. Now this has been remade, I think, in this year. I'm not sure whether that it's actually been released yet. It may have been. It's been remade from a male point of view. It's called The Bitter Tears of Peter van Kant, and I very much want to see that. I want to see how that gender change, how that affects the dynamics of the movie. Of course, I'm sure whoever directed it is not going to be Fassbinder, but then Fassbinder was one of the most unique directors there ever was. So that's my conclusion. I'm sorry I went on so long. My conclusion to the films of '72. I hope some of you have enjoyed these videos. Again, a playlist will be, I will include the playlist for all the films of '72. It's probably the most, of all the things I've done in my 2 years on YouTube, I think that I'm most proud of actually digging that deep into one specific film year. So, okay, thanks a lot for everybody who listened. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.